everyone. So I'm Tori Walters, Chief People Officer at ANS AI, and it's my pleasure this evening to ask questions to our wonderful panel. So Darren, can I start with you? Sorry, okay. You're on the spot. You often talk about the UK being at a real inflection point, and where we are right now. What do you think is the difference from maybe other waves of digital transformation that we've seen in the past?
A couple of things, I think. I think the first is just speed. So I think about, I've been at this for 30 odd years and we've seen different waves, and I think it's just the pace of change of this one. And I speak from a Microsoft, which is obviously a technology company, and so even for us it feels incredibly fast, mm-hmm. and so for others it must actually be a little bit daunting to keep up. I think everyone can remember their ChatGPT moment kind of 3 or so years ago when you kind of got to touch this consumer thing, and when consumer technology kind of lands like that, it tends to take a while to dissipate and diffuse. But how fast organizations like Microsoft have turned what is consumer technology into secure, enterprise-ready, capable solutions that are applied and being diffused so quickly across enterprise is just phenomenal. And so I think that whole speed agenda is nothing like I've seen before. And I think the second thing, which is quite different, is that I suppose in my last year, I've done 140 exco or board roundtable discussions with the biggest organizations across the UK to talk about this topic. Now, that didn't happen during the cloud kind of journey, where you're kind of moving digital assets from your own data center into the cloud. But in this kind of era and this revolution, it's a board and CEO level topic because, frankly, in that cloud journey, you are asking a CIO to go and execute a project called cloud transformation. In this journey, the technology is important, the platform's important, and CIOs are beautiful people. There's many in this room, and your job is incredibly important to create the structure and the platform and the security layer and all those things. But actually, the energy to transform with AI, it's line of businesses, it's functional leaders, it's CEO top down. That's where the budget is, frankly, but that's where the energy is, because how you do AI is not just add it on the top of your existing processes. You actually have to step back and say, who understands the process and who can transform it? And that is not generally the technical team. That's the person who owns this process, who's doing it every day, who, I get an example of someone I mentioned on Monday, which is a 28-year-old secretary in a company called Shoesmiths, one of the biggest law firms in the country. It's that person that's created all the agents, that has created a ton of transformation, because she understood the processes. She understood where the friction existed between customers and employees. That's different than other technology revolutions. And so you have to have the full backing of CEO, line of business leaders, functional leaders to transform and make change happen. And so that is actually probably an even bigger difference than any other wave.
When I look at our own business and us becoming Frontier, I mean, this is as you sort of call that, this isn't a sort of technology bolt-on work stream. This is a fundamental shift in your target operating model. This is true business transformation, which touches people. It touches the way that the whole process, the whole business functions. And as you say, that definitely needs that top-down CEO endorsement to enable that to happen. I mean, we as a business, we've got a very simple plan that we operate to. We have 3 pillars. Becoming Frontier is a fundamental part of what we're doing, and we deliberately did that because I don't think you get that sort of the full effect of it. It doesn't get fully embedded unless it is really endorsed center stage and everybody is behind it. Because in my opening, I mentioned I genuinely don't believe that this is a technology challenge. This is a people transformation piece, that you're going to get people to change their operating model, the way that they're interacting, they're working, and that's a very different approach.
I completely agree with what the guys have said. Having been working when the internet was first coming in and when we used to call it e-business and e-commerce, it does feel like a similar moment, but I agree with Darren, it feels different. And for me, I think looking at where we are as a UK from a technology industry point of view, I think it feels different because we have the ingredients now that we need to realize this potential. So we have the compute infrastructure, we have the compute power. If you think about the compute power now we have at our fingertips, thanks to Microsoft and to others, it's, scale beyond where we were even 5 years ago. We have the data now, the digital data. Companies have the digital data in place that can then, utilize the AI. So it feels like we have the ingredients now where even a couple of years ago we didn't. So it does feel like it's kind of a step change, which means we can really, really supercharge and realize this potential faster than we could with the internet, I think.
I would agree with that. And I think just to build on some of the things that were said earlier, one of the things that feels really different from my vantage point is there's a level of creativity, I suppose, that is required to really harness this technology and everything it can do for a business that I don't think is a muscle that some of our business leaders have had the chance to develop yet. So as well as thinking about amending and redesigning workflow and process and understanding it, mapping it, finding the points of friction and fixing them, there's also that bigger kind of existential, well, a business that has the expertise that we've got and the customers that we've got and the data that we've got and the skills and the assets that we've got, if we are not constricted by the person hours in a day for any particular process, what should we do? What could we do? What have we just never even attempted before? Because it would have taken too much time, too much energy. There would have been too much friction. And that's quite overwhelming. Yeah. I find from the businesses that we spend time with, and, there is definitely a journey to go on, but the scale of the opportunity is just phenomenal. And you do have to start with, just ironing out the points of friction and having everybody build that muscle. But I just don't think we've had to do that as a business community before. I think that's new.
Opportunity, but also quite scary to some. So it's how do we help them on this journey? How do we help them to realise what they can do? Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. I mean, fantastic points of view there, and quite aligned across all of you. Rich, I'm going to come to you next to start us off. We know there's a huge amount of excitement with AI. There's also a sentiment that there's a lot of organisations not quite getting the fundamentals right. Why do you think that is? Where do you think maybe some organisations may be going wrong?
I think it's quite harsh to say some organisations are going wrong. I think there's a huge amount of positive intent. Everybody is trying to do the right thing. I think what they're looking for is a degree of guidance around how they sort of navigate this landscape and how they transform their organisation. I think from the conversations that we have with customers, I think it often starts with just understanding your baseline. Where are you at today? And not everybody does fully understand their baseline. If you're being really, really critical, we had to go through this exercise ourselves. You have to ensure that your data is in the right place and in the right shape to really capitalize on the opportunity. You have to really consider quite deeply the sort of guardrails and governance that sit around all of this. I mean, when we launched Copilot to the entire business, we did slow it down a little bit to go faster, but just make sure that we have that governance around it so that when we do launch it, we can launch it with confidence. But I come back to the point around business transformation. This is a significant shift in business strategy. It is not a bolt-on. It's not a technology work stream. This is a fundamental top-down, CEO-down approach that you've got to sort of create a sense of community around. I mean, one of the things I'm very passionate about is that yes, we would set the direction as a business, this is where we want to go, but how do you get that excitement, that energy, that ideation, that creativity coming from within the organization? And we found very naturally it's just sort of spun up. I mean, our Copilot and agent user groups have just exploded. I mean, 600 agents being developed in a 3-month time frame is quite phenomenal. That's just for us as customer zero. It's a little bit scary to some degree around making sure that that's being controlled. We're controlling that in the right way. But creating that community, I think, is really fundamental.
It's culture, isn't it? And I think in an organisation like ANS that has grown so quickly and has got a culture of kind of entrepreneurialism and innovation. I'm not surprised that it's just exploded. I think if that is not your culture, because you are just wired differently as an organization, it's not about right and wrong, is it? I think it's just about difference. You are going to have to think differently about how do we create the environment in which people feel like they can experiment and they can try things and they've got other people to bounce off. So back to that point, if this is a people challenge, the technology is almost the least complicated thing that has to be grappled with. And I think organizations that pretend that that's not a big deal and actually we'll buy the licenses and we'll be ready to go. You absolutely won't be. There's a huge cultural piece that has to go with this, and you have to know where you're starting from.
Yeah, it's interesting. I should have a pound for every time people say to me, "Technology is not the problem, Sue. It's the people and it's the change management and how we get everybody on this journey, how we bring the people with us, how we make sure that our workforce and our customers think this is something we're doing with them, not to them." So that culture bit is absolutely important. I don't think, to your point, I don't think any organisation wants to get this wrong. I think there's a lot of organisations that are doing really, really well and thriving. And we saw this week at London Tech Week and the government's AI Adoption Summit on Monday, it was very much government kind of, right, how do we get more sectors, more industries adopting this technology? And we've created at techUK, we announced it on Monday as well with the Chancellor, an AI Adoption Coalition. So us as the tech sector, but with trade bodies from every other industrial strategy sector to help other organizations, to help other sectors, because people are on different levels of this journey. So to understand what they're worried about, what they're concerned about, and how we can help them move forward that journey. And even if I'm talking to the defense industry or the manufacturing industry or the creative industry or the energy industry, they are similar challenges that people are facing. They are culture, they are change management, they are skills, I'm sure we'll come on to skills, they are governance. So it's common issues. So if you're sitting there kind of going, oh my God, how do we do this? Others are feeling that as well. But the good news is that we have the expertise, we have the knowledge, we have the skills, we have the tools and technologies and the people that can help you to understand what is right for you and move it forward.
And we need that because, we're sat here in the UK, we're sat here in Manchester, we're sat here in this room, and the rest of the world is moving forward. And so, we're not doing too bad. We do a diffusion report every 6 months. So how quickly is AI diffusing into UK society? And, we're 8th in the world right now. But the challenge is that 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 are diffusing twice as fast as we are right now.
Yeah.
And what that means is that if you're sat there with anxiety of how do I make this change, I think you need to turn that anxiety into curiosity and into action, because the reality is that AI creates the lowest hanging fruit we've ever seen in anything ever to just create a business and compete. It's the reason why all the law firms were the first into AI, the first deployments of Copilot, the first deployments of Copilot Studio, because they saw the disruption coming very quickly. And that's a national imperative for us to create value, to export new capabilities across the globe, and to make sure UK businesses are competitive. And that means that we have to diffuse quickly. And so if you're sat there in an industry, there is a ton of Microsoft startup companies right now who are building companies with 2 people and 20 agents, competing with companies that have 3,000 people and 0 agents. And that's why you see large enterprise moving so quickly on adoption and diffusion, because they're transforming themselves to compete. We see less of that in the small and the SME space, but that's the heartland, 73% of our economy. And so the initiatives that you announce and the initiatives that I spend my life talking about too with the Chancellor is about how do we create the incentives to get to people moving faster. And a part of that is investment and taxation and incentives and skilling. But the other part of it is, let's stop talking about AI as this negative that's going to undermine society, and think about how we use AI to create a better future and a better society.
Yeah, agreed.
Liz, I'm going to come to you now. You mentioned 13,500 people already in Greater Manchester working in AI, and some fantastic stats. Do you can understand why Manchester is often framed as the next AI hub? which is really exciting for us in the room. But getting credibility in this space is quite difficult and hard won. So what do you really think sets Manchester apart from all the other major big cities competing for that?
I think there are a few things, and I should say that stat about 13,500 people, my favourite thing about that stat, and I do love a stat, is that more than half of those people are not working in AI-first companies. They're working in professional services, in banks, in financial services, in manufacturing businesses. They are embedded in the rest of our business space, which gives me hope back to kind of what we were talking about before. You know, the way to kind of adopt and diffuse is to think about dropping some of those people that have got these skills into organisations that perhaps haven't had them before. We have got a head start on that in Manchester. We need more of it, but we've got a head start on it. I think there are a number of things that mean that there's more substance in Manchester than there are in some of the other places in the UK. I should say as well, I used to have a job where I looked after all of the UK and APAC from a tech ecosystems perspective. I had to pretend to care equally about all of the regions and cities, and I don't now. I just get to double down on Manchester, so it's a delight. But I think one of the things that is genuinely different here is we've been very proactive at an ecosystem level to try and figure out what have we got great raw ingredients in. You know, the fact that the Turing Innovation Catalyst exists is not an accident. It's not a whim that I came up with on my own. It was the city coming together across the public, private and academic sector to do a bit of an audit and figure out where have we got assets that we think are underutilized? Where have we got strengths that if we put them together in a meaningful way, we could catalyze something that would deliver real growth? I don't think every city region does that. And I can say that with reasonable confidence, having spent time in most of them. There's often a lot of kind of competing agendas and, well, you know, I'd rather it wasn't AI because my business is not in AI. And actually, I think we do that relatively well at a city level. I think once we've done that kind of reckoning to understand where is there an opportunity and where have we as a city got a right to win, once we've made that decision, effectively the city gets behind it. So I think that as a starting point is incredibly positive. I also think, you know, a lot of innovation that we see coming through the startups and scale-ups that are in our community have come from people who have got incredible domain expertise. So they might be a teacher, they might be a lawyer, they might be working in some type of advanced manufacturing, and they've realized that there's a really perfect opportunity to deploy AI and build a business that can really be a kind of standout success. We've got some really great fundamentals from the broader business space in this city. We've got real strength in a number of sectors that when you then start thinking about what would a really successful AI-powered business in this space look like, you've already got the domain expertise. I do think we've got some special and slightly unique ingredients. Also, from a cultural perspective, we're a city that people know about, both nationally and internationally. And I will admit that we have made no bones about the fact that we will lure international investors here with a weekend of music and football and then just magically introduce them to our startups and scale-ups that need funding. We've got no shame about kind of leveraging what the city's famous for, but even having that kind of brand Manchester does work in our favour.
Yeah. So next question and final one, because I'm very conscious of time, and I could sit and talk to you guys all day, but it's Social Mobility Day that Darren mentioned, and something I know that all of you, it's close to all your hearts on this stage. AI could either, you know, really widen that gap for us or close it. So one of the things we need to be conscious of to help AI create bigger and more career opportunities for everybody.
We need to make sure that, and I loved Darren's point about helping people to participate in this. I completely agree. But we also have to help people to thrive in this new era, in this new work. So what does that mean? So from a skills point of view, it's of course giving them the skills that they need to use the AI in their pockets. And we're very proud to be part of the AI Skills Partnership, which I know Microsoft is well. So the government, as well as industry working together with government, have pledged to train 10 million people in basic AI skills by 2030. So how do we get, you know, how are you using this? You know, how are you understanding that? So people, but it's got to be then the next level is helping people to thrive at work, right? So, and we could talk about this a lot in terms of, you know, how do we make sure people are comfortable with AI at work, that they're using AI and work that's helping them do their role, but do their more value-added role and what they went into their roles to do. But we also need to think about, this isn't, as Darren was said, this isn't okay, I've done a training course, now I've ticked the box and I move on. This is a life learning thing. And one of the things that is on our mind, I'm sure it is on everybody's mind, is agentic AI and AI agents. Of course, they're huge, and what Rich is doing and ANS is doing is really impressive and super powerful. I came across an article last year that said this will be the last generation that will only manage humans. Going forward, we will all be managing a hybrid workforce of agents and humans. So when we talk about skills, we talk about bringing everybody and giving everybody the opportunity, we need to think about not just the basic skills, but what do they need to thrive? And it is, how do you manage people and how do you manage agents along, are there different management skills you need? I think there's definitely, we need to do more, and this goes back to curriculum as well as in the workplace around critical thinking, about challenging the AI, and if you need to edit a document, can you edit a document? Are you challenging the document? Are you using your creative, thinking, curiosity? How are we developing those skills as well? So I think those will be some of the skills that people will need to thrive, and everybody will need them. So how do we make sure that we give everybody the same opportunity and chance? And if we could do that by tomorrow, that would be great.
While you're all adopting AI.
Yeah, just do that as well. But yeah, and of course, and I wouldn't be doing my job without saying this, to make sure that that is equal across everybody. So everybody, gender, diversity, everybody. How do we make sure we don't leave anyone behind?
I think the point on access is a really, really important one. People that have got the right ambition and drive should have equal opportunity to be able to embrace this technology, embrace this opportunity. We're massively, massively passionate about what the Academy does. We're just, Arlene and her team are just about to release level 4 and level 5 apprenticeship programs. The opportunity is there. It needs us and others and this community in this room to help sort of drive it and push it forward and give people the opportunity, make sure everybody does have access to the technology. But embracing it and driving that at pace is going to be critical.
One of the things that is always on my mind from an inclusion perspective, and particularly when it comes to skills. So at TIC, we've run a bunch of skills programs over the last kind of 2 and a bit years since we established, and we've reached about 1,500 Greater Manchester residents to either enter into or advance in careers in AI. They've all been from underrepresented groups, and they've been from across the boroughs of Greater Manchester. And it's that last bit that I think sometimes gets forgotten in this conversation about inclusion. When we're talking about Greater Manchester, it's a bit like the kind of north-south divide that we talk about at a macro UK level. There is very much a kind of borough of Manchester versus the other boroughs divide. And when we all work and in some instances live in the borough of Manchester, you can be super excited 24/7 about being in this hive of innovation and AI growth. It's not the same if you travel less than 10 miles to the northeast of Greater Manchester. And the access that people in some of our boroughs feel like they've got or not got to everything that we are working together to put on offer is something that I think we've also got a responsibility to try and bridge. We've done a lot of work over the last couple of years with the Manchester colleges. So that's a college group that have got a college in every borough. So you are physically on people's doorsteps. And we've done a lot of kind of open mornings about come in and ask us your most, what you think is a silly question about an AI career, and we'll demystify it for you and, connect you in with a program that might not be one of ours. I think we need to do a lot more of that, because otherwise we're at risk of forgetting we're a really big city region and it's not all happening within half a mile of buildings like this.
You're taking a big risk asking me a social mobility question. But, it's personal, but it's also professional. And, Sue mentioned that the government target of 10 million people skilled by 2030. It used to be 7.5 million, but Microsoft delivered 1.5 million of those in the first year. So they upped the target to 10 million. I think we account for every other player combined in that journey of AI skilling. And we have we have clear mechanisms to deliver that. And I think we did such a good job in that. And we were so thoughtful and deliberate about making sure it was focused on lower socioeconomic groups that the government gave me a job, which is the social mobility champion. It's been an all-day adventure for me, social mobility, because it started at some ungodly hour this morning. with 20 of the biggest CEOs in the UK. Rishi Sunak hosted us. I did the kind of opening spiel. And by the way, I was the only person in that room as well that had parents who were voting in the Makerfield by-election. Look, why does this matter? Because if we get this wrong, it will create a bigger division than we have today. And we're pretty poor on the global charts when it comes to kind of not equal distribution of wealth. This is about equal distribution of opportunity. This is saying, why should your future be a function of your parents' existence, your parents' class, status, or wealth? It should be equal opportunity for all. And that's at the core of Microsoft's mission here as we drive our skills agenda. You know, not just the people at Microsoft. Frankly, I'm holding 30,000 Microsoft partners across the UK to account in how they execute this. You saw this, you joined us what feels like a week ago, but it was just yesterday in a roundtable of all our partners talking about, you know, what are they doing and how are they supporting this agenda. And this is not a conversation about fairness. It's a conversation about economic future and growth. We need everyone in this society to get us to be a future AI leader, because frankly, we're so poor in this space that every other economy will be taking advantage of every piece of talent in their society, and we have to do the same. Like I say, I could keep going on this, but I won't. I'll just kind of pause it there. It's at the core of our focus, and you know, hopefully it will be the core of the focus of many people in this room to bring the talent forward, that generation that already has AI fluency, turn that into economic advantage for your business.
Brilliant. And yeah, what a way to end it, finish on. Thank you so much for all of your insight. I think we can all appreciate everything that you've shared with and takes it back to our organisation. So I'd like to ask you to join me in giving the panel a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.